Hi, and welcome to Mapping Oedipus Rex. Today we'll be talking about the text of Oedipus and how we're going to go about mapping it, and what mapping is and what that means. So I'm Mike, this is Vic.
Hey.
And what would you say a mapping is?
So, I carefully chose the word mapping so that we're not talking about analysis or, God forbid, interpretation. These interpretation in particular is now a taboo word in literary studies, and I understand why. Mapping really signals a different way of looking at literature, literary works, and not just looking at it, but what I'm really interested in is talking about it differently. What launched me into developing the approach that I call mapping was that I was so dissatisfied with the way people were talking about literature. More or less, opinions versus opinions, disagreement, no sense of real communal understanding. And yet when you read a book, a really good book, you have that feeling like I'm one with the author. You aren't asking yourself, am I understanding something the author didn't want to say or didn't want me to think? That just seemed crazy to me. And so if I recommend the book to you, it's because I believe you're going to read the book and enjoy it in a very similar way than I did. But when it comes to discussing literature, all that's out the window. And we have our own, every person has their own reading of the text. Every person has a different way of thinking about and feeling about the text, which makes the discussion then, in a way, become pointless. And I didn't feel it should be pointless. So what is a mapping? The mapping metaphor is like saying the text puts you into a landscape which you have to navigate. And the navigation of that is like being an explorer. You need to find your way through. And the landscape is filled with challenging precipices, steep climbs, there's water, that has to be crossed. And so you can't just decide I want to go, in certain direction, 45 degrees, and follow your compass and go straight, because the landscape doesn't allow you to. And what I think we can do is, if we find out what we had to do to get across this landscape, if we can actually retrace or keep notes as we go, and then record that, we can share that, and it turns out that everybody will find the same precipices, everybody will recognize the same water that has to be crossed, and if there is a way to get across that water, for example, you find a little rowboat on this side of the water. If that rowboat is somehow always going to be there, suppose that would be a problem. How does the rowboat come back? But if we knew the rowboat was always going to be there, you'd say, when you get to the water, you're going to find a little rowboat. And that's the only way to get across, so you're going to have to row. We all have to row. And it's interesting then to go back and say, what was your experience like? How do we talk about our experience as opposed to the other things one could talk about? Well, we don't want to ask, what does the text mean? What we want to do is go into any part of the landscape that's a bit of the text, and then say, what's the challenge here, and how am I navigating or negotiating that challenge? And
I love that analogy, because rather than interpretation, you're arguing whether there's a mountain there at all. You're sort of, when you tackle a text, you're disembarking in basically uncharted territory. And the same mountains are going to be there, and you can talk about what those mountains might mean, but you're still going to identify that is a mountain, and you're going to identify that is a river, or that is a rowboat that you use to get across that river.
Yeah.
And I think that seeing it in action might better depict how it works.
Yeah.
So talking about it talking about it within the context of Oedipus Rex, because that is what we're here to do today, is to map the text of Oedipus Rex.
Yeah, and so as we map it, we'll see if we can agree that where the mountains are, that there are mountains, and that they're over there and not over there.
Right.
Let's see if we can agree, and if that somehow makes our discussion more meaningful in the long run. So we're only because we're going to go through this landscape one step or one paddle at a time. It's going to be slow it would be slow to map it all. We won't try to map it all because
We'd be here a while.
we'd be here a very long while. But let's try it. Okay? So for anybody who wants to find the text and follow along, you can go to oedipus-mappings.com and find both the translation that I did. You can also, we're going to show, you don't have to use that translation at all, but I did my own translation for it. And then also there you can find the Greek. If you happen to be able to read Greek, then you can jump between the English translation and the Greek. And you can also find the mappings that I've written out. So if you, after the fact, would like to go back and see what a mapping looks like, you can find it all on this website.
Okay, so with that being said, do we begin with your translation and start working our way through it in a bite-sized fashion? Or do we begin with, where do you want to start at with this?
Well, so it's interesting with this play. Everybody always starts with the text, right? And
Right.
the text starts off with the name of the play and the names of the characters. But that is not what happened to the ancient audience. So what I'd like to do is describe to you what it would be like to be an audience member in Athens at the time this play was first produced, which was around 430 BCE. Maybe 429, we don't actually know. But the reason why we think it was then is because this text features a plague, and a very significant plague hit Athens right after the beginning of the Peloponnesian War. So it's convenient and, to my mind, persuasive that that is when the play was written, and it was written and produced all in 1 year. So we can say 430 or 429, something like that. So let me tell you what the audience would have experienced. First of all, the theater is on the side of the hill that is still famous in Athens today as the Acropolis. This is the sacred hill of Athens where all the temples are. The theater itself is actually a temple. It's part of the sacred hill, and going to the theater was not something you paid money for to go to after work, like to relax. Going to the theater was part of your civic duty. It was on a religious holiday. Everybody was supposed to quit work for the day and go to the theater.
Sounds nice.
And so, well, it's nice. It also makes the going to the theater sort of serious business. It's like civic business. And the theater is on the side of one hill, the assembly is on the side of another hill, and the jury sits in trials on the side of a third hill. So it's the same group of people going from one hillside theater sort of setting to another, and so they're either conducting business in the assembly, they're judging somebody for a crime that they've been accused of committing in the courts, or they've gone to the sacred hill to watch plays put on in honor of the god Dionysus. So this all happens at a festival, a religious festival that was a big religious festival in Athens called the City Dionysia, or the Great Dionysia. So
So the experience of the audience, they're not just there to see a play,
Right.
casually going and strolling up and
Right.
seeing a production. They've been there, they're at this festival, they are transitioning between different sort of layers of maybe like a civic duty, and then they arrive at this play.
Right.
So what's the experience?
And so they're sitting in an amphitheater. We don't know exactly how many people could fit in the theater, but it's at the bottom estimate at least 15,000, and at the top estimate maybe 25,000.
Wow.
And that, assuming there's about 30,000 citizens in Athens at the time, that would be somewhere between half and 4/5 of the citizenry all in the same space at the same time. So this hillside would have been packed with people, solid, and it's everybody that's a citizen in Athens. Now, I'm not going to go into that right now for you, but that does not include women. There are some suggestions, some people believe that women were permitted or encouraged, allowed, whatever, expected to be at the plays. We don't know. We really don't know that. But anyway, so it's a large number of Athenians sitting together. Also, foreigners. Part of the Great Dionysia was an opportunity for people from other cities, an opportunity they were forced into, to come to Athens bearing the tribute that they were then paying to Athens as part of the deal that they signed with Athens at the end of the Persian Wars. So you have representatives of other cities who have paraded across the stage before the theater performances begin, their goods that they are contributing, the money that they are paying to Athens. So it's a sort of sign of servitude on their part, and they are also bringing in the money that makes Athens rich, because Athens is at this point leading an empire. So you have all of this sort of pomp and circumstance sort of attached, and like political importance and international, if you call the cities, like they're separate, they're not one nation. Greece is not a country at this time. Every city is its own entity.
Well, and I think that's interesting. The Athenian Empire, they're at the seat of this sort of geographical power. They have people paying tribute to them. They have this very big festival that sort of celebrates or encompasses civic life. So that is very curious to me, because the story of Oedipus Rex, what many I think will take into the story, is recognizing Oedipus as sort of the archetype of arrogance. This is a character that is regarded for his hubris. So in segueing into the story, in the disposition of the audience, or the sort of expectation or mindset of the audience.
Yeah, that's absolutely right and interesting, and we'll get to that in just a minute. So let's just picture for a moment that we're seated in this theater. How do you know that the play is beginning? There's no curtain. Well, somebody has to come on stage. What happens in this particular play is a group of people come in, and we don't know whether they came in all together or they came in one at a time and grouped themselves. But the orchestra is the flat area at the bottom, which is circular, at the bottom of the amphitheater, sort of at the focal point. And in the middle of this flat area is an altar, which is square block, let's say, something like a square block on which offerings are placed. And that morning we can assume before the plays begin, and the plays are not as we expect plays to be attended at night. They started first thing in the morning. But so actually very first thing would have been the parading of donations or a tribute to Athens, and there would have been sacrifices with smoke, burning sacrifices on the altar. And those would have been meant to go to the god, let's say Dionysus, who is the god being honored at this festival. So let's assume it's to Dionysus. Then the play begins. So the smoking altar, there's been an actual sacrifice in the middle of this theater. And then, but how does the play begin? Well, in this case, people file in, and they are carrying branches, probably, I think, laurel branches, because as it will turn out, laurel is, it's a fact that laurel was the plant, the tree that was associated with Apollo. And we'll find out that Apollo is at the center of this play because what's going on in Thebes, the city, in Athens and Thebes, is a plague. And the people that are filing in are carrying these laurel branches wrapped with white wool. Now, why are they wrapped with white wool? You can kind of guess. Do you have a guess?
Should I guess why they're so they've
got
these little
what would you
branches
think that means?
Wrapped in white wool to show some kind of I'm not sick, like there's a sickness that's around, and or maybe as a token of worship to maybe pray for health, or
yeah. So these are great guesses.
Okay.
Actually, maybe both of them are right, but I think for sure the one is that carrying this branch that's got, why would you ever wrap wool around a branch unless it's it's got to be a symbol, right?
Right.
This is a symbol in the true sense of the word, because there's no practical reason to do it otherwise. So you're showing that you are in some sort of symbolic, you are carrying a symbol, and you want that symbol to be seen. So let's say, what does it symbolize? And you took two really great guesses. I think let's just start with I think the most basic and supportable one is that they want to pray to Apollo. So these people, and they come in and they sit down around the altar on the ground. We don't know whether they sat exactly in what position they sat, but we're pretty sure, I think we can be pretty sure that they didn't just take different, like lying down, half lying down, sitting on their rear end with their legs out, sitting with their legs crossed. There was probably a proper way to sit. I'm going to guess there would have been. And so that you would know that they are not just sitting down because they need somewhere to sit. They are sitting because they are in a posture where they're around the altar and they have got the branches that say, we want to talk to Apollo. So the attention, the object of their efforts is actually a god. Now, let's think that the audience would have recognized this because this is the way that a supplication really was done. So what you've got is a supplication, in this case, being enacted as part of a play.
Let's talk supplication. The word supplication. What does that kind of entail?
Asking a god for help.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. So supplication just means a situation where you're basically begging for help. So it means the people have a problem. Now, if it's recognizably Apollo, if by those laurel branches and the white wool on them, and maybe the way that they sit, you can tell that it's Apollo. You can also guess what's wrong. Do you have a guess?
I mean,
I already gave it away, I think, a while ago. But
yeah.
But even if you didn't know that, what do you know about Apollo?
I mean, Apollo, famous for having the chariot with the sun. Am I on kind of the right track with this? Or?
Yeah, that's part of it. Some of
an archer, maybe.
Yes, he is an archer. And what is he? When he shoots, what happens? Do you remember the beginning of the Iliad?
I'm being tested here. I wasn't prepared for the beginning of the Iliad.
No, but okay. I'm not testing you. I just want to know if you remember. At the beginning of the Iliad,
he shoots light, right? Is that
yeah?
Kind of
he shoots plague into the Achaeans. Apollo shoots plague into the Achaeans because they have angered him.
So he shoots plague out, like that's kind of
like arrows of plague.
Okay.
And so the people are starting to die, and everywhere they're being put on funeral pyres, and their bodies are being burned. Smoke is going up. So this is the story. This is the way you think of Apollo. Apollo is the god of plague. He both sends plague, and in that same story in the Iliad, Achilles suggests that they get a prophet to come in, and the prophet is asked, what do we do to make Apollo so mad? And the prophet says, okay, well, I know exactly what you did, and I'll tell you. He tells them what they have to do to correct the situation, which they do, and that lifts the plague. So Apollo is both the bringer of plague, and he brings it for a reason, and then he can remove plague, and he does it when the people show compliance with whatever it is that he requires of them. So in this situation, we can see that people are supplicating Apollo, and we can infer that that's because they are suffering from plague. And in fact, in Athens, assuming that this is in the first year of the plague, first or second year of the plague, then the Athenians would have been doing this already, but not in the theater. Now it's being done as part of drama,
okay.
Right? And that's weird, isn't it? I mean, so this is one of the things where I would say, let's stop and look at the territory now. Because how would you feel if you're in the audience and you see a supplication being enacted, which in a sense repeats supplications that were probably being tried in Athens anyway?
I mean, I would feel, first off, I'd be able to maybe relate, recognizing the symbols and the laurel wreaths wrapped with the white wool immediately. But also, I would wonder to some extent if there isn't some mockery making of the actions of the people to have that. But to use that exact same symbol in a dramatic performance.
Yeah. And in fact, since this is a dramatic performance, so what would happen if this was not in the theater and they were having a supplication? Well, we can only guess, but they would sit there for how long? That's the question. Well, let's say a long time, because they are waiting. They are waiting for the god to come. And they're going to sit there until somebody make some move to, and we don't know exactly how this would be done, but somebody has to break that silence at some point. Maybe a priest would do it, and maybe a priest would then speak a prayer, and maybe then they would all lay their branches festooned with wool down on the altar, if they haven't already, and they might then disperse. And you would expect actually nothing to have happened. That is, did anybody really think a God was going to pop out, show up in answer to a supplication? To our knowledge, that never happened. There's no report of that ever happening, and we would be surprised if there was such a report. We'd be a little incredulous. We would doubt it, right? We would say somebody was playing some kind of a trick there, because where would is it really probable that a God would pop out and show himself, say, "I have come"? So the people who are watching this supplication, that is a dramatic enactment of a supplication, actually start having an opinion about it right away, which is, are we wasting our time here? I mean, I came to the theater, and what did I come to the theater for? Action. I want speech. I want action. I don't want to sit and watch people do something that is going to produce nothing. So you could say that the people are fed up with supplication at this point. It's brought nothing. The plague is strong. It's rampant throughout the city.
Well,
people are dying.
If they're familiar with that after having just engaged in supplication, I mean, it could be just more on top of more of the exact same thing. So that would lend itself to the exhaustion of seeing something that maybe hasn't worked yet, and the sickness still being present.
Right. So what would you anticipate happening? You're in the audience. You're watching these people doing something that you think might be a waste of time, and yet it's the only thing that people really know to do. You're kind of, we don't know what to do better, but I don't want to just have more supplication. I want something to happen. So maybe that priest is going to stand up and say the prayer, and then maybe the prayer will be answered. Well, let's imagine that's what's going to happen in the play. The priest is going to say a prayer, and then the play is going to show the prayer being answered. How would you feel about that?
The prayer being answered? I mean, there would be an excitement. If I were living through a turmoil and engaging in supplication, to have someone break the silence and say, "Hey, here I am," I mean, I'd be thrilled, I would think.
What about your skepticism? Might you not also? So I think that's definitely true. I agree with that. I'm not going to disagree with that at all. But on the other hand, wouldn't you say, yeah, but that's just a cheap trick. In theater, you can make a God, you can have a God show up and solve everybody's problems, but we know that's not how it is in the real world.
Yeah.
So I don't want to see a fake solution to a problem, right? That's not going to help me. How am I going to, I'm going to leave the theater and say, well, that was wonderful for them, but it's not going to work for us, right?
Yeah.
You see what I mean? So you're kind of still in a quandary. I think the audience would be in a bit of a quandary, because as it anticipates, like, where is this going to lead? It doesn't really like the alternatives. If the God comes and solves the problems, you're going to say, yeah, that was, that's just theater.
Right.
And if the God doesn't come, you go, yeah, so that was just like a waste of our time. Like, that didn't help either, right? Yeah. We're going nowhere here. So I think that the audience would just be getting more and more tense and more frustrated. Then the doors open. So I think we have to assume that however long it took for the audience to get frustrated, and that only somebody who was there would be able to judge, but it could have been, half a minute, or 5 minutes, or 10 minutes. But it didn't have to be extremely long before I think one would have a chance to sort of register these different feelings. Then the door opens and you're going, okay, is it a God? I mean, are we going to see a God appear now? Or is it a man? And which do I want? Well, if it's the God we've already said, that seems fake. I mean, okay, cool, but
Theater.
but not real. And if it's a man, okay, well, then I'm interested. I'd actually at this moment, I'd say I'd prefer it to be a man, because at least that I would like to see what he does. Has he got a solution that I don't know about? Is he going to react in a way that's really interesting? So I hope it's a man. So the guy, and a man comes out, well, a person, and it doesn't, we'll assume that by his costume, we can tell it's not supposed to be a god. Let's just assume he looks like a man, and in fact, we're going to say he has a little bit of a limp. Now, there is a god that limps, and that's Hephaestus. But let's say that this man has some kind of walking stick, and he's not crippled, but he's got enough of an impediment so that it's visible. And he comes out, and he comes forward. So you're going, okay, well, we've got a man here, good. I want him to solve the problem. The fact that he's crippled is a little interesting. Like, why is he crippled? And what, like Greek heroes are usually like specimens of perfect physique and
Adonises and Hercules.
Yeah, beautiful. So the fact that he's not, that he's got a little bit of an impediment and impairment, some sort of maybe damage has been done to him. He's not perfect. He's not a perfect specimen. So it's kind of questionable, like, what might that mean? What might that bring to us? And then he comes to the front of the stage, which is above the orchestra where all the people are praying. So they're all oriented around the altar, but they're not oriented 360 degrees around it. They've left the part facing the palace open. And he's come out of what we probably the stage decoration would have let us know that it was a palace and not a temple. So he's not a god. We might have known to expect a human from that too. It's a man. He's come out. We don't know yet who this man is, but and then he's standing there, and all the people in a way they're in their prayer position. And it's as though, and it's so he's come out almost figuratively. It looks as though he has come, and he stands right in front of them, behind the altar. The altar's down below him, and they're around the altar, and so they're around him. They're sort of facing him, and then he speaks. And I thought maybe I have a translation, and I want to explain a little bit about my translation in a minute. But why don't we just take a good translation and read it first, and then I'll read mine.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me unlock my phone screen here. So this is the Fagles translation by Robert Fagles, and I'll just take it from the top, the first couple of lines here. This is Oedipus Rex.
Why don't you read the first 8 lines?
The first 8 lines, all right. O my children, the new blood of ancient Thebes, why are you here, huddling at my altar, praying before me? Your branches wound in wool. Our city reeks with the smoke of burning incense, rings with the cries for the healer, and waiting for the dead. I thought it wrong, my children, to hear the truth from others, messengers. Here I am, myself. You all know me. The world knows my fame. I am Oedipus.
Yeah, that's actually quite powerful, isn't it? I found it right then, just listening to you. It seemed powerful.
Good translation, Fagles.
Yeah, no, Fagles is great. And as a translator, I think he's wonderful. And what I got out of this was a really clear sense that this man is improper in his speech. After what we just said about the fact that these people are not praying for a man to come out. Yeah. They're praying for God, but he clearly feels that he's the one they're praying to. The way that Fagles has phrased it.
My altar?
My altar.
Yeah.
I mean, do any humans have the right to claim that that's my altar? What does he mean by mine? If he just means the one in front of my house, wouldn't you, I don't think that, I honestly don't think you would use that kind of language in any, it doesn't matter what sort of like country or time period you're in. You wouldn't say, that's my altar, and you came praying to, what doesn't he almost literally say?
Praying before me.
Before me,
yeah.
Right.
Which is ironic because he came to them.
Yeah. So he seems to feel that their prayer is matched to himself. And that seems improper. And then he talks about how famous he is, and that seems...
Yeah.
So all of these things, how do you feel about this man at this moment?
I mean, I think he views himself above all these other people crying out for help.
Yeah.
So maybe he views himself as the hero that can swoop in and save the day, or maybe he just has a very high opinion of himself.
Yeah, I think that his opinion of himself is so high that it's questionable whether we can accept it. Let's say he turns out to be the savior. I think then we might grant it, but right now, first of all, he's also putting himself ahead of the God. The fact that he says, you're praying really, and I respond, to me that says, I think we all know no God's going to show up. So he's already said, look, let's not BS our way through this. Let's not pretend a God is going to show up. No God is going to show up. So I came. I came personally, and I'm your best shot, and I have a lot of confidence. I really think I'm great.
But I mean, he doesn't quite phrase it like that. He doesn't quite phrase it like I'm your best shot. He phrases it as you're here at my altar praying before me. The whole world knows my fame. I'm Oedipus. He doesn't even give the Rex there. He's just the first name.
Right.
It's his expectation that they know exactly who he is.
They know who he is, right?
And all of his deeds.
And all of his deeds, yeah. So I just want to check back on our landscape idea. Are we in the same? Do you feel like we're in the same landscape here?
I think so.
And that landscape is that we are still in some quandary about who can solve the problem. The problem is plague, and we don't have a medical solution for plague. We don't have any solution for plague. We have the traditional ideas that you ask Apollo you ask a priest to ask Apollo on your behalf, tell us what we've done wrong and what we can do to fix it. That's your best sort of like procedure. And so this guy who's stepped out is like, what does he know? What does he think he knows? What kind of solution does he have in mind? On the one hand, you might love this. You might go, he's got chutzpah. Maybe he's a little arrogant, but if he's got a solution, more power to him, and I will be grateful.
Someone showed up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So at least he showed up.
Yeah.
And in a way, isn't that what he says?
Yeah.
What did he say about showing up?
He describes the burning of the incense in the city, the rings and cries for the healer. And he says, I thought it wrong, my children, to hear the truth from others. Here I am myself. So he didn't even accept the messenger, like maybe Apollo. You have to talk to the priest, and then maybe the priest talks. Oedipus has shown up in the flesh.
Yeah. He's like, I'll take this on directly.
Yeah.
So I'm, in a sense, if I'm interpreting what you just said right, he's saying a God would actually have sent a messenger.
Right.
But I'm better than that because I'm showing up.
Yeah.
I'm here. There's not going to be any sort of like distance between us. I'm here. I'm going to take this on, and by goodness, by gosh, I'm going to solve it.
Yeah.
So I think you're thinking, well, either he's really arrogant and full of himself, and it's awful. It's going to be awful, or this guy actually is amazing, and he's going to pull off a miracle.
Right.
And I want to see that happen, So we're sort of, again, in a kind of quandary there. Now, I'm going to read my translation, and I'm not reading it because I think it's better than Fegel's. I'm reading it because I translated so as to make sure that the problems, that is, the things that make the landscape hard to get across, are as evident as possible, instead of trying to smooth a path in advance. When you get in that landscape that is a real wilderness that's never been trodden on before, that's different than going to a landscape that's all mapped out and the paths have already been not only laid out, but they've been paved and railings have been put in and water fountains so that you don't have to get thirsty while you're going, all of that. So I want to go back to the wilderness here. And so my translation might be a little less easy to understand than his, but let's just try it. Children, offspring newly bred of old Cadmus, to me thus with withies suppliant wreathed in wool, tell the meaning. Full of incense is the city, full of hymns to Pion Apollo, full of groans, about which I, judging best not to hear from messengers, my children, others, thus am come myself, all famous Oedipus, as I am called. Now I want to jump straight there are several problems in this, and we've already hit on some of them. But let's again, I think in order to have landscape that we can agree on, let's see if we can agree that there's a kind of like a problem here. That is something that we will think about. Not just we, but anybody who hears or sees or reads this play will think about. And that is when he says, I am all famous. And what does all famous mean? Famous to all, right?
Yeah.
What did we have in Fagel's? What did Fagel say about being known to everybody? Do you have that?
Do you want me to paraphrase? Or?
Yeah. No, just what was his quote? How did he?
Here I am myself. You all know me. The world knows my fame. I am Oedipus.
Because he actually said it in two different ways. You all know me. The world knows my fame. Those are two phrases to get across the more literal and pithy, just I am the all famous. Or, so posse klenos. Posse is to all, klenos famous. So I am the to all famous Oedipus. I'm pronouncing Oedipus the way it is in Greek for a reason that will come clear in just a minute. Doesn't really matter. So the fame to all, when he claims to be known to all the world, I think that there's going to be a kind of like a cognitive response, that is a mental response to that claim. That's a universal claim. I am known to all the world.
Yeah.
What is the audience going to do?
Immediately ask, do I know him?
Exactly.
Do the people next door know him?
So we are in the same landscape, because that
Yes.
is exactly what I think you have no choice but to do. You're going to say, have I ever heard of an Oedipus?
Right, yeah.
And actually, I think most of us would say, actually, yeah, I've heard of that. Like for us modern people, I've heard of the Oedipus complex with Freud. What is the Oedipus complex? That's where a man falls in love with his mother and wants to get rid of his father. Not a man, actually a child, a male child, wants to do these things. And that's what Freud called the Oedipus complex. And he was naming it after the play, because the play is about a man who fell in love with or married his mother, had sex with his mother. And we know this.
Spoilers.
Well, it's a spoiler that was already spoiled for the ancient audience. This is talked about in Homer. It's talked about in an earlier series of plays by Aeschylus, and it's talked about by the poet Pindar. And it was probably talked about by lots more people. We just don't have all of the texts come down to us. So even in the limited number of texts that have come down to us, we have several versions of the Oedipus story, which means it was a commonly known story. So it was already pre-spoiled.
So the Athenians would have had the high notes of the story. They would be aware of it.
They would. And so when he says, I am famous to all, what would they think? They would think about the things.
Him.
It's the Oedipus. Yes, first of all, he's right. He is famous. But there's something weird about it, because he is boasting to be famous here. And yet, he's the thing I first remembered about him is the Oedipus complex, or if I was in ancient Greek, I would remember the story that he killed his father and married his mother. And that would not be something that anybody would boast about ever. This is a terrible thing. It's terrible now. It was terrible then. It hasn't changed. This is something that is actually not culturally dependent. It would be hard to find a culture in which I think that having killed your father and married your mother would be celebrated. But go ahead. Let's see if somebody can find that. And if they do, that'll be the exception that proves the rule. Because I think we can agree that is just an awful thing. So why is he up there using this as the reason why we should trust him, that he's going to solve this terrible problem we're facing now? He says, I am the man who slept with my mother. You should choose me. I mean, trust me. I'm going to do a good job for you. I'm going to get rid of the plague. Actually, now you could go, oh, no. Now I understand why you could cause the plague.
Yeah, right.
Right? If you're the kind of guy that sleeps with his mother and kills his father, you are trouble. You're dangerous. We maybe want to run you out of town as quickly as possible, right?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of ironic in that sense. You know, they're praying for somebody to answer this problem. He shows up, and he is the answer to the problem in a sense. Once you get rid of him.
Now you know why we have a problem.
Yeah, right.
And so yes, we might have to get rid of him. So that would be one thought. The other, but on the other hand, we're still hoping. Okay, so that would be a solution. Now we have actually got an idea of a solution. Like, okay, he doesn't know it yet, but maybe the solution is we have to get rid of him.
Yeah.
So the audience now has a completely different thought than he's having, which is interesting. And I think we can agree that that the audience should be at this place where it's going to have this thought that he could be the problem. Now, we know that he's boasting, however, and he can't be boasting about being the killer of his father and the husband of his mother.
Yep.
So if he's not boasting about that, what is he boasting about? And then you remember, oh, there's other stories about Oedipus that I might also have heard. How many of us have not heard of the story of the Sphinx, that he solved a riddle of the Sphinx? And by solving the riddle of the Sphinx, he saved Thebes. So we go, oh, he's boasting about having saved Thebes by solving the riddle of the Sphinx. That makes sense. So now I know that this play, the moment we are at with him in this play, in the fiction, that moment is somewhere lies between the two most important moments in his life. The first one was he solved the riddle of the Sphinx. We know that's in the past because he's boasting about it. And the other one is he killed his father and married his mother. And that one is, or at least if not the actions, the discovery that that's the truth. And this is part of the Homer story. It says these things happen and then the gods made it known to all men, to all mankind. So I know that he has not yet had it made known to him that he has married his mother and killed his father. So we're between those two moments. And at this point, I actually know what the play is going to be about. I can guess the play is going to be about how he moves from not knowing that he killed his father and married his mother to knowing it. And that is going to be interesting. And as he finds out, I can also link it to my thought that maybe he will be exorcised. He'll be removed from the city. And when he is removed from the city, that's going to leave the city clean and the plague can be gone. So we're at that point now.
So let's talk about the landscape there, because your translation, you say, brought us back to the wilderness. There's no paved road exactly. So now that we've kind of agreed on some of the same landscape, we've kind of viewed this Athenian context and the modern context. I feel like most people are familiar with an Oedipus complex, and a lot of people are familiar with the riddle of the Sphinx. So I'm curious about what kind of the next steps of exploration are. How do you go forward after identifying some of these landmarks?
So what we've identified, not only those landmarks, but we've also found we kind of know what problem the audience is thinking about. The problem is, in our midst is someone in this case, but who has done terrible things, but doesn't realize that the terrible things they have done are bringing a kind of destruction on our city. And so what we have to do is figure out how to make it clear which terrible things done by which people are bringing destruction on our city so that we can fix it, so that we can get those people to, or those actions, or as in a maybe more complex sense, the attitudes that led to those mistakes have to be taken out of the city before the city can be clean. So we're going to have to find out now, how did we get into this terrible situation, and how does one then get back out of it? So do you see? So there's a kind of a problem now.
Right.
This is like, so we know why we're watching the play. In other words, now we know we have a reason to care how this play works out, because we now have a mission, you could say. We really need to solve this problem. We know what problem it is. We recognize that if this is the reason why we're having a plague, we're not going to get rid of the plague until we figure out how to get rid of the plague. And it's going to be somewhere, it's going to lie in this region of figuring out what led to the mistakes, what mistakes were made, what led to those mistakes being made, and how does one stop making those mistakes and correct for them. Do you see what I mean? That's quite a lot.
Yes.
That's
a lot.
That's a game plan. That's a pretty complex set of objectives to have for the audience, and the audience has them now. Line 8. Now, where I would go next, and I don't think we're going to do it now, but maybe in our next session, is to talk about the last word in line 8, which is translated "as I am called." it turns out that there's this begins this word, and we'll see how it works next time. But this word becomes the hinge into the sort of like next chapter of how we are going to work our way through and out of this. It's the very first step towards that after having recognized the kind of problem that we're in.
Wow. I think that's a great point to pick up in the next episode. So Vic, thank you so much for your insight into this first installment of Mapping Oedipus Rex.
Well, it turned out to be as fun as, for me anyway, as I hoped it would be.
I had fun with this.
Yeah.
I feel like I've taken a lot out of the first 8 lines. For it being so like, it's bite-sized, it's digestible, I feel like just to go sort of word by word and to start forming that landscape, almost like the way you draw your analogies were so vivid. I felt like I could almost see the land and imagine myself walking through it and identifying that mountain over there or that river, and I can see that through line.
Yeah, well, it's going to be lots more of that to come, and that's really what makes this a fascinating discussion. Is we're actually, what we're doing when we discuss is we are actually mining the experience we've already had, but we weren't really conscious of it because there's so much going on in such a short amount of time that it passes by in our subconscious. So if we can finish with a note on Freud was interested in the subconscious, but I think this is a different view of the subconscious. It's not a subconscious that, say, wants to sleep with mother and kill father. This is a subconscious that is processing problem solving for us when we're not even fully aware of how that's happening. But by looking at the play, we actually can go back and reconstruct our own process and find out the complex thought process we've gone through. And that discovery is really fascinating for us because we find out who we are that way, right?
Right. We have some introspection from the work.
Yeah.
Okay. Well.
So thanks for sitting through this with me.
Thank you for watching. Check out OedipusMapping.com. There's a link up here, maybe over here, somewhere over here. Editors. Anyway, thank you so much.